Welcome back, everyone, to another exciting episode of Avid Outdoors Podcast. My name is Dave. This is Tyler. Today, we're talking about the guide life, the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Hi, I'm Tyler.
And I'm Dave.
We're charter captains from Sheboygan, Wisconsin.
We're also avid outdoorsmen. We love hiking, hunting, fishing, camping, and just being outside.
We want to connect you with the experts in the outdoors and hear your story.
We're stewards of this planet, and we want to make sure the hobbies we enjoy today are available for generations to come. This is Avid Outdoors.
All right, everybody, and you got just Dave and I today.
Yep, here we are.
We're excited to bring you this episode, actually, because we've been doing it for a while.
Yeah, nothing but pure excitement for this one. We wanna tell you all the ins and outs of the guide life. The ups, the downs, the goods, the bads, the uglies,
funny stories,
funny questions, all sorts of interesting things. Maybe you are aware of, maybe you're not, but we kind of want to let you into this funny, silly lifestyle, I guess you could call it. Tyler, you are a year-round guide, whereas I guide just during the summer and my off months. Kind of go through a typical year. What's it like? Like, what do you guide? And maybe just start with like how you got into it first. I guess that'd probably make the most sense.
Yeah. So I guide for a company called Wolfpack Adventures, wolfpackadventures.com. And I, like Dave said, I guide year round, but I started first mating when I was 14. And so I've been doing this for 10 years now, full time for, I think, 5 years. I lost count because you'd never work a day in your life if you love what you do, right? So
I guess that's what they say. That's what the old timers tell me, anyway, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So So I start off, let's say by the first of the year, right? The first of the year we start booking our ice fishing trips.
Sure.
And the thing that we specialize in is trout, brown trout, and steelhead through the ice on Great Lakes tributaries, mainly here in southeastern Wisconsin. Then we also do inland panfish stuff, but definitely not as popular around these parts. Then we move on to walleye fishing. As soon as the ice breaks up, we're guiding walleye fishing trips up in Green Bay, the tributaries to Green Bay. We're also running trips for trout out on the lake because the lake usually opens up right away as well. And then it's directly, end of May, roughly, directly into charter fishing, which I am joined with Dave during charter season. And then after that, once the salmon start running up into the rivers in the tributaries, we start guiding fly fishing. And that takes us all the way back up to ice fishing.
Gotcha. That sounds like a busy schedule, and I know that there's a lot of overlap in there. I know, Tyler, we've talked about it quite a bit, but basically what I do and what I have been doing, I don't know, the last 7 or 8 years is just full-time Lake Michigan trout and salmon trolling out on Lake Michigan out of Sheboygan. And, you kind of mentioned that because you also have that overlap of the walleyes out on Green Bay, you actually really enjoy that, being able to kind of switch back and forth, whereas if you're day in, day out just doing one thing out on Lake Michigan, not that I don't like it, but there are times when it drags. Yeah. Particularly when the fish aren't biting, because let's face it, we can do everything in our power sometimes, and sometimes they just go inactive. Usually we can catch something, but sometimes it's like you can't buy a bite.
Absolutely. And I guess that kind of goes into the bad of guiding fishing trips. So
I think that's a good thing we do. We kind of like talk about our background first and then get into the bad stuff, because I think there's far less bad stuff than what there is good stuff.
Absolutely. I mean, there's, as far as bad stuff, the biggest thing that I find challenging is just the time away from home. And juggling the time away from, because not only do I guide, but I travel for sponsors as well. So in my off season, what I have little of an off season, I am traveling for sponsors. And like in this past winter, the winter of, we call it the winter from hell, 2019-2020 winter has just been absolutely terrible for guiding. And so I guess that goes into another bad thing of of weather. Weather
Yeah.
is an absolute pet peeve of ours, I guess.
Yeah. I would say for me, I care far more about the weather than I do anything else, because being out of Sheboygan, yeah, I'm not at home during the evenings and things like that, but in general, friends are still around, and honestly, some of my better friends, they're out fishing with me on the lake anyway. Like I'm chatting with them on the radio, or we're talking about fishing, things like that. So I don't miss like just being around as much, but I definitely hate it when I honestly hate a 17 or 16 mile an hour wind out of the northeast than a 25 mile an hour wind out of the northeast.
Yeah.
Because when it's 25, you're basically
you're not
going.
fishing.
Yeah. Or
Yeah.
30, you know what I
Yep.
mean? So you're not fishing when it gets to be that bad, but
It's that fine line. Like when we talk about weather, well, one would be if it's lightning, we aren't
Right,
fishing.
exactly.
If
Safety
it's
first.
raining, we're gonna fish.
Yep.
And rain doesn't bother us. It's
And the fish don't care.
no, the
They're
fish don't
already
care.
wet.
Absolutely, yeah. This is true. But when we talk about weather, the worst part of weather, honestly, is when it's so.
Yeah.
Like when you're like, oh, we could
Borderline.
fish.
Yeah.
But it's gonna be uncomfortable because you know what's gonna happen. You're gonna get out there. You're probably gonna get
Maybe
sick
somebody's
customers.
gonna get sick. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not only is it uncomfortable for our customers, but it is uncomfortable for us as well. So.
Yeah, I mean, you've fished on a boat with a fly bridge plenty. The boat I just bought has a fly bridge, and I've spent almost all my time, up on top. The fly bridge being the upper controls of a boat. You've got the lower set, which is, you can steer the boat right from the cabin of the boat, or the fly bridge is actually the second set of controls, and on top of the fly bridge, if you can imagine like something that's swaying back and forth, the top of that thing is swaying far more than the bottom, right?
It's like 10 times worse.
Yeah, exactly. So there are days you just have to like hold on for dear life, and just like my muscles are so tense afterwards. Like I feel like I have to go to the chiropractor every other day.
Yeah, for sure.
But really, honestly, it's basically the wind. We generally kind of rain can be bad, but if it's not so bad if it's cold, and we have rain gear and whatnot. But definitely the wind is about the worst thing because that wind that lake can kick up so fast.
Yeah,
and it just gets so nasty, and it can be unpleasant. And again, kind of I don't know how you are. We talk to our crew and we kind of ask, hey, what's your experience level? How far did you come? Do you want to get out now, or would you rather wait for another time? But wind's not fun for anybody. Honestly, it seems like I can catch fish on a bluebird day, like calm, flat weather, same as I can when there's 2-foot waves. You know what I mean?
right.
So as far as I'm concerned, I like it calm.
Absolutely. I guess another pet peeve, or not pet peeve, but a thing that we can't control that is the bad would be bad fishing or fishing in general. I mean, as far as if you took out the fishing, you took out the weather, and all we really have to worry about is getting you from point A to point B on a boat in nice weather. I mean, our job is about as gravy as it gets.
Yeah.
But you throw bad weather and bad fishing in there, and that's like my entire life, like my entire day surrounded outside of actually guiding and being on the water is honestly being concerned with where are the fish going to be tomorrow?
Yeah. Yep.
What's the weather going to be like?
Yeah.
Because we want it to be an enjoyable experience for everybody.
And what's honestly unusual about it is that it seems like people don't necessarily care as much if they have to cut their trip short due to bad weather, like, bad waves and they get sick or whatever. But but like they seem to be a little bit more offended if the fish aren't biting. Like I
Yeah.
can control one more than the other. You know what I mean? Like, obviously I don't, I'm not a fishing guide because I like just being on a boat in the
Yeah.
sun all summer. You know what I mean? Like I like catching fish. That is why I do it. I want to catch you fish. I want to see that smile on your face. I want to see that smile on your kid's face. And I want to get out there and catch fish, same as you do. There's as much risk for me as there is for you. You're fronting, a couple $100 to go out fishing. I'm putting my reputation on the line, hoping to catch as many fish as I possibly can for you. So I want to show people a good time. I really don't want to have somebody leave, unhappy because of something that I can't control. So, it can be a pet peeve. But in general, I will say that almost everybody that I encounter can understand, that, hey, this is nature. These are things we can't understand, that we can't control. And generally, things end up pretty good. There's nobody that walks away thinking, oh gosh, I really hated that experience.
Yeah.
Like that doesn't happen. So,
right. And I would say that's like, if we get into a pet peeve and like, we don't want to, the point of this is not to rag on our customers,
right.
but like the biggest pet peeve that I have when booking trips is the same question. Well, are we going to catch a limit?
Yeah.
Well, and the polite answer to that is, I don't know.
Right, exactly.
And honestly,
it could
we
happen
don't know.
at any time.
Yeah.
And the lake can surprise you. I think it's weird in Sheboygan, especially Sheboygan, Wisconsin, where we charter fish out of. We gained a reputation at one point. I don't even know what it was, because it's certainly, well, I guess it was kind of like maybe the beginning of my charter fishing career. It gained this reputation of like, hey, you go there and you're just going to fill your cooler up.
Absolutely.
Which is great. Like people remember that. People come back to Sheboygan for that. But it leaves a lot of room for like, if you're not going to catch your limit, are you going to be disappointed?
Yeah.
I don't understand, because I've gone charter fishing in many different places all throughout the United States, Mexico, Canada. And, especially like if I'm going up to Canada on a do-it-myself like trip, I'm not going to get mad that the fish aren't biting. You know what I mean?
And
like,
there's nothing you can do. And I guess that's kind of, we've had this discussion before, just not while we were recording ourselves. Yeah. Is the fact that like, okay, back in the earlier part of the 2000s, it was almost expected. Yep. Right. It was expected to come out and get a 6-person limit, which is 30 fish. It still is 30 fish. Yeah. But the thing is the fishery has changed. And in my opinion, I don't believe the resource, especially the Lake Michigan resource, it's there for recreation, for fun. It's not there to feed your family. Yeah. And I think, and it's also not there to just put a pile of meals on the table. Right. Yeah, they taste great. Yep. And they're fun to catch and all that stuff. But in my opinion, and like what we were trying to, I guess, stress is that the fishery has changed. Yeah. And we're not there. We're there to catch, and it's changed, in my opinion, for the better. I mean, we don't catch as many fish. We catch way bigger fish. Yeah. They're more fun to fight. But like, I don't understand personally why, and this is for every kind of fishing, whether it's salmon fishing, whether it's for pan fishing, because there's a ton of people around that take limits of fish every single time that they go out fishing, and I don't understand that, because in my mind, the resource is not there to feed your family. If you like eating fish, eat fish, but it's not there to save you $1, I guess. There's it isn't. Yeah,
there's very little like let's say you're gonna go out and do it on your own. There's no way that hunting or fishing is a money saver. You know what I mean? Like, right. It's you're gonna buy tackle, equipment, licenses, all sorts of things. Like, you're not in general, you're not saving money by trying to go out and catch it, in some way, get it from the field or get it from the lake, honestly, I think charter fishing is maybe even still one of the closest things you can get to that, because if you go to a grocery store, minimum you're paying probably $15 a pound for salmon. And I think honestly, there's a lot of times still out on Lake Michigan, you're going to be able to get that amount, that amount in pounds
get
of
your
fish.
money's worth basically.
Yeah. But that's not the point.
No, that's not why we're there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think to kind of go on that point is it's like with salmon, right? Like it's a great treat, but it's not, you're not there to feed to go, well, I have enough food for a year now,
And my neighbor for a year.
Yeah.
And my grandma, she really likes salmon, so we wanted to fill up our cooler for her too.
Yeah. It's one of those things where, okay, like I use salmon and I use fish, especially fish. Like, okay, I'm a deer hunter. Mm-hmm. I like deer hunting, and that's because I look at deer hunting like I can save a few dollars because I already have all of the equipment to do it. So if I didn't shoot a deer and eat it for food and not buy beef, I would literally then be wasting money.
Yeah.
But seeing as though I have all the equipment to do it and the land to do it, it makes sense. But with that being said, I don't use fish that way. Yeah. Like I use fish as I might literally eat fish once a month that I catch. And
I probably eat fish a little bit more often than that, but
And like salmon, I mean, how many times? I bet you I've eaten the last year salmon maybe 3 times.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, salmon is good. There's no doubt about that. I love eating it. The one thing that you mentioned, you said the lake has changed for the better. I don't really know. I think it's definitely changed. I wouldn't say it's better or worse. I personally think obviously the fish are bigger than they were. You've got the potential for a trophy, like a once in a lifetime fish out there that you didn't have before. Kind of to go back to maybe, those 2003, 2004 out on Lake Michigan, when basically your standard size mature king salmon was reaching about 12 pounds. They were cookie cutters, and now they're over double that, 25 pounds, 30 pounds, somewhere, up to 33, 34 pounds. Yeah. There was a 37 pound fish caught in the last couple of years. And I think I think this year's fish will be bigger than last year's, but we've kind of been hexed by our own success. You know what I mean?
Right. And I think people are still trying to market on the success of the early 2000s.
Yeah. And it's a completely different ball game. It's I don't know. I personally don't, it's good to go out there and get a whole bunch of bites. Everybody wants to catch a whole bunch of fish. But in terms of what you're going to be coming back with, and it's all different. I personally think the fishing out there is good on an average basis.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? The fishing is definitely good.
Everybody just has this mentality that if you don't get double digits of fish or like those days when we had 40 bites a trip, right now they're over.
Yeah. Well, for the
most part.
Yeah. I would say it doesn't happen. That's not to say put a period on that story.
Yep.
It'll be that way again. You know what I mean? It's a fishery. It's cyclical.
And it can be that way.
Exactly.
At certain times of the year, right now you could go, right now brown trout, they're stocked up and they're shore.
It all depends. There could be on any given day. It's just not day in, day out. You're not going to come back with a limit every single time. And I've been, like I said, I've been fishing in Mexico, across the United States. When I get on a boat, I don't have the expectation that I'm just going to go and hammer on them. You know what I mean? In fact, most of the charters and things I've been in other places, I kind of, struggle to catch a couple fish, but we catch fish, and I can say that I fished in a new place, or I got to fish with a guide that I haven't seen in a year. I think that's huge, like, and catch up on things that happened in the last year. And he's able to show us, the different things that have happened in that town. He's able to make recommendations. And I think, like, I might fish 10 times and have that story of like just hammering on them, every 10 times, what I mean? Like, I don't expect to go out there and just light them up every single time I go out.
Yeah. I think that's one thing that we've discussed is emphasizing like very strongly that the fishery is as good as it was in the early 2000s, just in a different way.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Like it's just totally different knowing that we put more fish on the wall now than we do in the freezer.
Yeah. And the other thing is that attention has been switched really from the king salmon being the top dog. You know what I mean? Like, obviously everybody would love to go out and catch a 25+ pound king salmon. However, there are so many rainbow trout in our lake right now, and they are big.
Really big.
And I think sometimes we ourselves in Sheboygan shoot ourselves in the foot because people around, people in the Midwest, like, they don't know the difference between, they don't care if they catch a 12-pound rainbow trout or a 12-pound king salmon. You know what I mean? Like, but, I personally believe the 12-pound rainbow trout is going to taste better.
Right. And granted, I have customers that when you tell them the king salmon bite's like extremely tough, so we're going to go fish for cohos and rainbows offshore, they get disappointed. But then if you go out and you catch 6-8 fish versus catching 1 or 2, their expectations are like, okay, that was totally worth it.
Yeah.
I mean,
and coho salmon, there's not a better tasting fish in the lake, and you've always got the chance, usually when you're fishing for rainbows and cohos out near the top, that you're going to get a lake trout as well, which I think are fantastic table fare. I'd rather even have a lake trout than a king salmon, but obviously that fight is unmatched. You know what I mean? You get a 25-pound king on the line, and you just can't compare it to any of the other fish species. You probably can't compare it to anything else in fresh water.
So as far as the fishery goes, it's the fishery plays a huge role in the life of a guide, because not only what's actually happening on your fishing trips, but the media surrounding the fishery plays a huge role on how many trips you are going to book.
I'll put it this way. I thought what was interesting, because last summer I got into making the videos. I went out with a friend of mine. We did a video, and the fishing was like, I don't know, mediocre at best, I would say. Maybe even bad at best. And we set up lines. We caught 1 coho salmon right away. We're trolling around, and I want content. Like, I want something to look good for a video that people are going to get interested in the outdoors. And right at the end of the trip, we hooked into this huge rainbow trout. It was probably 13 pounds. I never actually weighed it, but posted a picture of that on Facebook, posted the video on there, and people from Minnesota were writing on there, man, we got to get to Sheboygan right now.
like you're gonna go off.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of the thing. Like, social media, it can be good, it can be bad, it can just kind of like show, like, that person obviously was jacked up about that. Like, he saw, like, hey, we have a chance at just that one fish. You know what I mean? Like, which is impressive. Like, people fish their whole lives to catch a rainbow trout.
Exactly. And like that kind of, when you're talking about, as far as in our business, Dave, you focus mostly on the Lake Michigan stuff, actually solely on Lake Michigan stuff, where me doing multi-species, I'll be honest, salmon fishing is probably the hardest thing for us to market. And we discussed this. We talked about it, and you're like, well, what about walleyes on Green Bay? I'm like, walleyes on Green Bay sell themselves. I mean, all around the Midwest and even the country, people who are fishermen and people who are walleye fishermen know about Green Bay walleye fishing.
Yeah.
So it doesn't take a whole lot to talk somebody who is interested into going walleye fishing to go walleye fishing. But the people who went fishing back in the early 2000s on Lake Michigan, that's our toughest way to grow a business right now, or way to book more trips, is the salmon fishing, because people, I think it's because the charter fishermen on Lake Michigan are still shooting themselves in the foot by saying, come over and catch a pile of fish with us.
Yeah.
I think it's about catching not so much the numbers anymore as it is the size, and that's the way it's going to be for a few years. Our stocking numbers are going up, all these things, all the above, but I think as far as the life of a guide and the life of a business owner and guide, you have to adjust to the way that the fishery is going to allow you to fish for the fish. And still, there's no reason why people shouldn't come salmon fishing.
Yeah.
But
going back to kind of the limits thing, I don't know how that, got to be the expectation, it's just odd to me. And I think, taking what you said about walleyes, Green Bay is a fantastic fishery. I do not want to put that fishery down by any means. However, there are many places you can go and get walleyes.
Absolutely.
Whereas, like, you talk to somebody from Minnesota, they can't go and catch a king salmon, like, with the ease that you can just come out of.
And that's what's odd is, like, we're talking about, like, the reason why people from Minnesota come to Green Bay to go walleye fishing is not because they can come and they can catch 5 and they can catch 5 over 15. Yeah. It's because they can come and catch a 10-pounder or a 12-pounder or a 14-pounder, and, like, so why does that mentality have to change because it's a salmon?
I don't know.
That's the frustration, but
it's weird. Yeah, because, like, obviously Lake Superior does have king salmon, but they do not get anywhere near the size as Lake Michigan. There's not anywhere near the number that are in Lake Michigan, even now with the low population, which is going to be coming up, by the way. But at the moment, it's low. It's still more than many places. Like, even if you go to Alaska, you can only keep one in a season, And people are upset that they can't go out and catch a limit of 5 every day.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, how weird is that? Like, people in Alaska, I think they would, like, just be itching to have the fishery that we have,
Right.
Our fishery is better than the natural fishery.
Yeah, 100%.
Oh, yeah. But
so as a fishing guide, what is I can tell you what my, like, I don't know what my biggest pet peeve is, what my biggest, like, moment is, or my hardest season maybe. Because I'm thinking of a season. Like, what is my hardest season? Like, why? What is your least favorite thing about being a fishing guide?
My least favorite thing about being a fishing guide.
Like, something that you just, maybe it's pumping out the head. Maybe it's whatever, like it. What is your least favorite thing?
I don't know. I guess, like, throughout I've kind of gotten over this, honestly, but because I've been so dedicated to charter fishing, it kind of leads to maybe a limited, outside life. I've allowed charter fishing to become not just a hobby, not just a profession, but, like, truly my life.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, if the weather is bad in the morning, you wait 3 or 4 hours and you just sit there and wait and you hope that it gets better. You know what I mean? And that's part of the life. If a trip, all of a sudden you have plans to go to a bonfire or something with friends on a Friday night and a trip pops up, you're kind of, like, looking forward to this because you didn't have a trip going on Friday, and then boom, you get one right at the last minute. Well, you almost
had it.
Yeah. You just kind of, you accept that as part of your lifestyle. So it doesn't honestly bother me as much as maybe what it used to. I just really, I enjoy that. I like the charter fishing. I like meeting new people and being out there and trying to see how many trips, see what I can put my body through.
Yeah.
I find it a fun challenge, and I guess I don't hate it. I don't mind it as much as maybe I guess what I used to in my younger days.
Younger Dave.
Everybody was all out and partying and things like that. But
yeah, that I will say that is kind of hard. I mean, that didn't bother me too much because I was always like it. It still doesn't really bother me that much. But I mean, yeah, I see where you're coming from.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess my answer to that question.
Yeah.
My favorite is it's going to go the opposite way. One of my favorite things to do is ice fish.
Yeah.
One of my least favorite things to do is ice fish. And the reason why I say that is because ice fishing is probably it's the most affordable to customers.
Yeah.
So you get a lot of people, and I love fishing with these people. I mean, they're so much fun. You get a lot of people that might not want to go on a salmon charter just because it costs a little bit more money. Which is fine. It doesn't bother me a bit. And I love fishing with customers that are there and they might have saved up for a year to do this one trip. And like, to me, that's freaking awesome. I mean, like, it's a bucket list thing. But with that being said, you get a lot more, we get a lot more phone calls with people wanting limits of fish during the ice fishing season. And that's also like probably some of the tougher fishing, So that leads me into why ice fishing is my favorite and my least favorite. Ice fishing is my favorite for trout because there's nowhere else in the country or nowhere else in the world basically that you can catch trout of the size through the ice that we do here in the Midwest.
Yep.
But it is the most work. I mean, talk about busting your rear end.
Yeah.
Because there's ice fishing allows opportunity for everybody to go fishing. Everybody can go to the store and buy a couple fishing poles and a couple tip-ups and be under the $100 mark. So it's very affordable, which is fantastic for kids and families and all that other stuff. But with that being said, that also allows everybody to go fishing. So you got to get there before everybody else to get your spot.
Yep.
And when you're a fishing guide on the ice, a lot of people tend to follow you around a little bit, and I kind of hang my hat on that a little bit and say, like, if it's that important to you that you have to set up right next to me and I'm that, like, supposedly that good or whatever you want to talk about, like, that's cool. Like, I guess, like, I've lived my life to get to that moment, like, where I am, people want to see where I'm fishing. And so I love ice fishing when you're there and you're fishing, but the preparation before and after the trip is probably the worst thing that I do all year long, especially for trout, because you're tying spawn bags, you're up early, you're driving long distances to find fish, and just, long days. Yeah. Very long days.
So people ask me all the time, like, oh, are you going to quit your job and do the charter fishing during the summer and guide, like, during the winter? Like, I don't know. Like, I like fishing for fun. Yeah. I like being able to go for fun, too.
Yeah, it's like people ask us, too, what do you do on your day off? Well,
yeah.
Like, in the summertime, I can tell you I probably don't go salmon fishing.
Yeah.
I might go walleye fishing or pan fishing because it's kind of like the old saying, does a mailman walk on his day off? Probably not. So I probably don't go salmon. I mean, unless I can do it a different way, go jig for him or something. But
I personally still like, because I like meeting new people, but I think there's something to be said about being able to take out your dad or go out on your dad's boat, or like take out, a friend, or go out on a friend's boat and stuff like that. So
that point, I think that's the hardest part. Like, put everything aside, the mental game, the long days, whatever. I think like my biggest struggle mentally with guiding fishing trips is like people still want to go fishing. Like people that I care about, my friends, and mostly my family, still want to go fishing with me on my days off. And I think I lose sight of that sometimes.
Yeah.
And like because it's like,
Yeah.
I really like the air conditioning today, like, and being inside. But like, I know my wife wants to go fishing. I know my dad and my grandpa and even maybe Dave wants to go fishing with me.
Yeah.
And so, like, you just have to remember that and like remember that, and like that's when you're there and doing it, it's fun. But sometimes it's the thought of doing it.
Right.
That's
it's
tough.
the motivation is taking that step. You're on a grind of like 28 days straight or something like that, and the last thing you want to do is see that lake one more time. But I've gotten to really get used to the fact that it's kind of like who you're with rather than like what's biting, how the action is, things like that.
We get to meet
where you are, like what style you are. Like I love harbor fishing, so like
and your harbor fishing.
If the fish are around the harbor and I have a spare minute, and even if I'm like dead tired and the fish are biting near the harbor, I want to be in the harbor. I like it.
If they're biting on jigs, I'm in the harbor too. But if it's trolling, sometimes it's just not the thing. But so we get to meet people from all over the country, all over the world, and that's one of the greatest things. And I mean, if you're not a people person, don't become a fishing guide.
Right. Exactly. And with some days you don't have the action, you've got to be able to make it fun for people.
Yep.
No matter what, you've got to make it fun for people, make it worth it, in Sheboygan, there's one person in particular everybody gives a hard time, but for a 5-hour fishing trip, he's pretty fun to fish with. We're not going to mention any names, but for 5 hours, he's pretty fun.
Yeah.
Fun to be around. It's after you've done that same 5 hours over and over and over again.
Right. And like that's one of the biggest things that, like you said earlier, you fished with guides because you wanted to fish with that guide.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's how I am too. Like I'll go on trips and go fishing with a fishing guide, and people are like, "Well, why you're a fishing guide? Why are you taking guided fishing trips?" Well, because I have a bucket list of people I want to fish with in my life. Well, one more recently would be Paul Castellano. I want to go to Niagara River and fish with Paul. Well, when my schedule allows it, I'm going to do it no matter what it costs. It's a bucket list trip. Yeah. And that's how I want people to feel about me too. Like, so that's why I always like, no matter how tired, no matter how many days you've been on the water, it's extremely important to put a happy face on, have a good time, because these people, like I said before, some of these people are saving money for a long time to go on this trip, and for you to be a crabby captain and a salty sailor, as they call it, is not a good thing.
Or even like I've heard horror stories like mates or captains showing up hungover and stuff like that. And the captain that I worked for, Jim on Sea Dog, I told him the first week I think that I started working for him, I said, when I show up to the boat, I'm going to give it my all, because like I didn't have any money whatsoever. So when I was thinking about people shelling out like $500 to go fishing, I was like, holy cow, people are actually doing this? Like, that's unbelievable. Like, I better like really show them my A game every single time. And it got to be that way with me. Like, hey, I might be tired, but I can't be dragging ass.
It's not the customer's fault. And that's another like horror story that I hear all the time is like captains being crabby at the customers and like barking orders.
Oh my gosh, I hear it. I hear about
or
that.
Like customers. One more recently that I just heard was the customer. His biggest complaint about charter fishing. He went on one charter, right, and he's like, I will never do it again. I'm like, okay, well, and why? And he's like, well, I went on a charter and with such and such a charter service here in Wisconsin, and it like they grabbed the rod when the fish bit, they reeled it halfways in, and then they let me reel it in for a little while, and then in order to finish it off, they reeled it in again, and then the first mate netted it, and then it was over.
Yeah.
So they never let the person like fight the fish. And I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, well that's not how 90%
right.
of the charters do it.
Exactly.
And because it's important, like it's important, just as important for people to have a good time. And like I will always preach, my customers can be as involved or as uninvolved with the fishing side of things as they want to be. So if they want to set fishing lines, more power to them. That is way less work for my first mate.
Yeah.
And if they want to run the boat and run the rods, and they know what they're doing, and if they don't, we'll teach them.
Teach them. Yes, that's exactly right. And it's important that, like, if you're listening to this right now and you are thinking about taking a guide trip or a charter fishing trip, that you communicate that with your captain, because I am excited to be able to teach people. You know, I want to show you how to do things. There was one group, I remember the coho salmon were biting like crazy, and we had plenty of opportunities. Like, I didn't mind, like, but the guy said, hey, do you mind if, you know, like, we grab the rod right away when the fish are biting? I'm like, what do I care?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
The only reason why we do is because we're so fast.
We see it, we see it way before anybody else.
Yeah.
Like, and I have a hard time controlling myself. So what I did, I put my hands in my pockets, and like I'm watching the bites go off, and I'm like keeping my hands in my pockets, and I'm like pointing with my nose, there, right there, you know, and they got a kick out of that too. They're like, wow, you're like, you know, you stand back and you set the rods up, or you show them how to set the rods up, and you know. The excitement for me is seeing the bite. So I'm sure for everybody else, it's seeing the bite too. They want to see what it looks like, you know?
Yeah.
It's fun. So with that also, like a lot of times, you know, people are somewhat timid. They don't maybe want to ask questions. Whereas like I want to answer whatever people want to know. Like when I go charter fishing, I pepper my guide with so many questions. I feel bad for him.
Granted, 70 to 80% of those questions are probably the same question that every person asks.
Exactly.
And that's fine.
Yeah,
like,
it's completely fine.
Because if they don't understand, if your captain or your guide doesn't understand the fact that you're on vacation, you literally have zero idea what you're doing. Well, I guess maybe he should get a different profession. But That's a whole other topic, but yeah, if somebody's asking me, you know, why do we have salmon here in Sheboygan? You know, what came first, the cohos, the kings? You know, how big do the rainbow trout get? What are they eating? That sort of thing. You know, what are the invasive species? How fast are we trolling? What is that board? What's that yellow block of cheese doing out there? You know that's
what I mean?
fun to answer those questions.
Yes, yeah.
The only time that I get a little weird when people ask about like, why is there salmon in like Lake Michigan is the people who like live here. like the people who live on the lakeshore and have no idea that they're in there. Like, granted, okay, they might not be a fisherman, but come on. Like,
I gotta be really honest about this. I was probably like 15 years old. Cause we always had a cottage on Lake Michigan, and we would see these king salmon float up onto the beach, you know, like maybe a fisherman had it on the line and it broke off or whatever. And these king salmon would float up on the beach, and I just like kind of always saw like, oh, they live here. You know what I mean? Like they live there. So it was like, I don't know, maybe I was 15 years old, and I finally started looking at them. My dad's like, oh yeah, they're not native to the lake. And I'm like, what? They've always been there. Like, I've always seen them there. So
it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't add up. But it is kind of funny how many people like live in or near the lakeshore or on or near the lakeshore, and they have no idea that there's salmon in Lake Michigan. Yeah,
exactly. And yeah, I think honestly, if everybody knew the resource that we have, we wouldn't have an empty day.
Oh,
ever.
no, absolutely not.
I think, you know, and part of this podcast is just spreading the word about that. Who knows who we're reaching, but like,
and how do you?
It's an incredible resource.
Yeah.
It's a fantastic resource. No matter what, like, so it was unbelievably good, like way beyond expectations, like fantastic in terms of numbers, you know? it's still a phenomenal resource.
Yeah.
You know, just because maybe we caught more at one point, that doesn't mean that our resource is any less good.
No,
you know?
it's just as
yeah.
fun. It's a great sport fishery,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean the life. That is the life of a guide.
Yeah.
It's just
and to kind of touch on your subject before, like being able to go with a guide, and I've never like sought out a popular or famous guide before. However, I have gone with guides that I've gone back to, and I've gone with guides that I will not go back to.
Yeah.
And it's trial and error. You know, you're kind of in one place. It kind of depends on what your goals are. Just kind of as an example, I was down in Mexico. I was recommended a guide, and you know, we caught some fish, and the mate cleaned the fish up right on the back of the boat, and we had ceviche on chips, like right there. Like, totally go with that guy again, you know, and just kind of the different things like he was able to point out and whatnot. Was flounder gigging in North Carolina, and I actually went with two different people doing this in North Carolina. One of them, you know, he was explaining all the different wildlife, all the different fish that we were seeing under the lights, because flounder gigging you do at night, so you've got all these high-powered lights and everything. Pointing out alligators, pointing out stingrays, pointing out tires, which like when you're in the middle of the night and you kind of like come up on this tire down there, you're like, whoa, what the heck is that? And then you kind of like, it's like a weird perception, right?
Yeah.
Like you're not expecting to see it. Like, oh yeah, somebody threw a Goodyear in, you know? And then I was with another guy doing the same thing. He was just kind of like quiet, you know, didn't really kind of let on, you know, not that I need to know everything about everybody's personal life, but like, you know, you kind of gain friendships through doing this. And if I'm not going to be fishing with a friend, you know, like
right. And I'll say, kind of add on to that. So I had a fantastic guide when I was out in Washington State, and I'll give him a plug in. His guide service is Browning Guide Service. He guides out of Forks, Washington for basically drift boat fishing for steelhead and salmon and stuff. And oh my gosh, okay, I'm 24, so for me to call somebody a kid is kind of weird. But, so he was 20 at the time, and like one of the most down to earth people I have ever met in my entire life, and like just the knowledge that he knew. I mean, we drift boated 12 miles of a river in the Olympic Peninsula, and he knew what seam to cast on. And like, you don't stop in a hole and fish a hole like we do here in Wisconsin. You are drifting through all these holes. So when you hit a spot, you're throwing out and you're just following your bobber down the river. And he's like, okay, you know, cast 3/4 of the way out. Okay, pull it back a little bit. That's the spot, blah, blah, blah. You know, like, this is where you want to be. And like, before we'd even get to the spot, he'd already be adjusting your slip float to like the right depth. And I'm like, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Because like, I can't remember that many spots. But I guess he does the same drift every day.
Yeah.
But it was just, I would go back to him just to go fishing with him. And it's not like we tore him up. We caught 3 fish. I mean, the same day, Jordan here, it was in April, and Jordan here had like 25 fish. So it's like, okay, you know, I'm not like I'm doing anything.
And you're
but
catching the same exact
fish.
Yeah.
But it was just an experience, and I got to share that with my wife on our honeymoon, and so it's an experience I will never, ever, ever forget, and I hope to do it again someday. And with the same note, I've been on guided fishing trips where it's like, you're an hour into the trip, and you're just like, okay, we can pack it up and just, like, I understand you really don't want to be here.
Yeah.
So it goes either way.
Yep. And, you know, the last time I was down in North Carolina, we had a guide as well. And the fishing, honestly, it was like, I'd say about as bad as it gets. You know, like we had we had a couple bites. Yep. We didn't actually land a fish. And the guide the entire time was laughing, joking around, you know, just like having a fun time with us.
Yeah.
And I would recommend that guy to anybody.
No, absolutely.
You know
You didn't
what I
even
mean?
catch any fish.
Yeah. Surf City Charters in Surf City, North Carolina. And you know, I don't mean it, that's not putting them on blast or anything. We didn't catch a fish. Like there's tough fishing, you know.
Yeah, there's nothing
like,
you can do.
Exactly. But you know, just for personality, you know, he was a frickin' ball of fun. You know, like just talking about this dating relationship that he was in, and you know, getting this boat sponsor and this tournament that he was in, and answering all the questions about fish that I wanted to know and different things to do in Surf City, because we go down to Surf City, North Carolina, I don't know, on a fairly regular basis. So we want to know as much, you know, like people don't really realize going out on a guided fishing trip is like, I don't know, I've been on cruises before too, where there'll be like these expeditions, these whale watching expeditions, and we are going out on a charter boat right past the whale watching expedition, seeing the same whales on our way out to the fishing spot.
Yeah.
You know, and not only that, but we're getting personalized attention, basically like on a, you know, if there's a captain and a mate along with my dad, me, and my brother, you know, it's like personalized attention. You get to ask them any question you want about the area, what other cool things there are to do there. A guided fishing trip is so much more than just guided fishing.
Absolutely.
You know? Yeah. And if you're not getting that out of a fishing trip, well, maybe you should look somewhere else.
Yeah.
You know, like maybe just decide not to go with that person, you know. And I think it should come from the captain, the mate, the owner of the business. It doesn't really matter. Anybody involved, you know, I think they should want to spread their information and
as
help
a customer or consumer of a guided fishing trip, oh please, like people will take time. This drives me nuts. Mm-hmm. Like people will take time out of their schedule to review you in a negative way. Yeah. I mean,
but they won't just say, "Hey, you know, I didn't like this or that." You know?
Yeah, when you're okay, so I've had some horror stories. I mean, right? Like I can't say the line that I really want to say because, okay, stuff happens, right? Like, and everybody knows what I want to say, but stuff happens. Like, motors break down, fishing is bad, whatever it may be. I particularly, I wasn't on this charter, thank God, but in the company that I work for, we had a charter where we had not one motor problem, but two. And it was supposed to be a 5-hour charter. We fished them for 8 hours because we couldn't get from point A to point B in a relatively fast amount of time because we couldn't go fast. Mm-hmm. Like we were literally putting along on one motor because we had double motor engine problems. One totally was messed up. The other one wasn't. And like we tried to make it right with the customers, and they proceed to go on and do a negative review. But then you have it on the other side where people have a great time, and they'll praise you up and down standing in front of you. But, and I'm not saying like, I'm not trying to like nag on anybody, but then they won't go on and review you in a positive way. So just remember, if you have a bad time on a fishing charter, say something. Yeah. You know, don't, and like, because out of respect for a business, if I have a bad meal at a restaurant, right, I generally respectfully say something. Stuff happens. You know, like, it's not like, I've been to restaurants where I've been to 100 times and had a bad meal. And like, it happens.
Your food is cold, and you know, you're kind of like, well, do I say something? Yeah. What, you know, like,
you're better off like politely saying something to somebody. And like constructive criticism is huge. Yeah. And
if your guide can't take it, again, you probably should look elsewhere. Yeah. Maybe the criticism or the review is warranted. I would say at least give the guide the opportunity to make it right. Yeah. I saw it was in a restaurant, but I thought this could literally be posted in any business at all. But if you have a problem, tell a person, not the internet. You know, like, right? As much as I care about making people happy, as much as I want people to have a fun time out there, there are going to be times that no matter what I do, like it seems like my day is just not going right. You know, like even like it might not be a motor problem. It just might be like, you know, a you don't want it to happen, but like you're having a bad day. You can't get stuff like you just like you're in a slump or something, you know,
you're spinning your wheels.
Yeah, exactly. And on days like that, personally, I would just as much like to make it up to that person as you know.
Absolutely. Like give us the opportunity.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't happen often.
And people's expectations are different too. Maybe they, you know, I don't exactly know. Did I project that? You know, I hope I didn't project that, but like, you know, I want everybody to have an enjoyable experience. Obviously, I like doing it. It's like I said before, it's my lifestyle. It's not just, it's not something I take lightly.
Yeah. All right. So as we're wrapping this up here, Dave, you get to take your pick. What's one of the most frequently asked questions that you get on a charter boat, or you get to tell a short story of like one of your best fishing trips, like with customers?
Oh boy, maybe I'll even do both. I don't know.
Okay.
So, and I'm not even just going to pick one question because I have several questions in mind that I really like. But I like for tops, like my least favorite question is, do you ever get skunked? Like, especially when it's like the first 15 minutes of the trip. Or if we've gone like a half hour into the trip and it's give me a chance.
do you ever get skunked? Well, now we will.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and I will say this, because everybody else, you know, a lot of people when we're not fishing are curious about it. Do we do like a fish catching guarantee or something like that? And I would say like for the majority of charter boats, no, there's no catch guarantee. I think that's pretty dangerous, honestly, because like I don't know what
we don't charge per pound when the fishing's good.
Exactly, and I don't charge more. You know, like if we catch over 10 fish, I'm not going to say, oh, you know, we did really good today. How about you know, like
it's going to be an extra $100.
Yeah, exactly. So, I think you run into that kind of touchy thing. I know like some charters have like a pound catching guarantee, which it's like to me that's basically selling fish.
Yeah,
you know? I don't. Yeah, that's very odd to me. You know, I don't mean to get on anybody. You know, maybe somebody is listening from one of those places. I you know, to each their own. But I think that's kind of a touchy thing. The other thing is like when we get a fish on, I have no idea the experience level of that person. I've got no idea if they're going to be able to land the fish or not.
Yeah.
Like I've had people literally drop poles in the water, you know, like if we're at like hour 3 and we haven't caught anything and we get a fish on and you throw the rod in the water, like I'm expected to give you money back on your trip for that. You know, like, or like you're handed the rod and the rod is up, down, left, right, and like slacking the line. Like, how am I in control of that? You know, like I don't understand that personally. And I don't think you go to the bait company to ask for your money back because your bait didn't catch a fish.
Yeah.
I don't think you go to the DNR and ask for your license money back because you didn't catch a fish. You know, I don't think you go to the rod company. You know, It's like, hey, we're paid to take you out fishing. I guarantee you we will take you fishing. Yeah. I guarantee you we will do our best to catch you some fish. How about do you have a question like that kind of sticks in your craw a little bit? Or
I always like there's like a list of questions that everybody asks you. One of the one that you can kind of you get some freedom with is well, how long have you been doing this?
I like that one.
I do like that one, actually.
Oh, it was the third day.
My answer to that a lot of times, well, I just wandered onto the boat.
Yeah. My buddy called me up.
Yeah.
At a spot.
And like we're not like saying that to be like mean.
Yeah.
Because you have to feel out your group, right?
Right.
But like it is kind of fun to answer some of these questions. Like real goofy, but I mean there's like, or is this a typical day of fishing?
Yeah.
Well, there
Is
is
this
no
normal?
such thing
Is this
as a
normal?
typical
Yeah.
day of fishing. Like every day is different.
Yeah.
And like, I guess the one question, and I already mentioned it before, and it's not even like on the boat when this happens, it's in the phone call, is, are we going to catch a limit?
Yeah.
No.
You know what's bad when the person, like, they've got their cooler, like, strapped to their, like, little luggage carrier on the back, like, and also their whole back, you know,
the bed of
cab
their
of
truck is
yeah.
full of coolers, and it's
that's not
like you
gonna
can
be good.
almost, yeah. I mean, we don't, like we said, we don't want to rag on people for stuff, and like you might fill them, which
Yeah.
is fantastic, but you might not, and
It
like
can happen.
to have that understanding of you might not is a large thing. But I mean, there's definitely ways that you wish you could answer those questions.
Yeah.
But
Or you like your next group is like waiting for you when you get back to the dock, and they're like, "Oh, what'd you catch? Let's see in the cooler. Let's see what is that?" It's like,
and you got like
yeah, and
one.
or you do have 10. You know what I mean? And they're
Yeah.
like, "Oh, we're gonna catch that many," you know?
Yeah.
And
Oh yeah, because then you come in at 10 o'clock and you're on a king salmon bite when the low light conditions, and your 10:30 group's like, yeah, we're gonna pound on them, and you're
yeah,
like,
you never know. I mean, like,
we're gonna try.
what's in the box? What's in the box?
Yeah. So well, life is a fishing guide.
Exactly,
That's
yeah.
what it is.
Yep.
So well, we're gonna wrap this one up. It's been an hour.
It's been fun.
It has been very fun. We got a lot of good laughs out of it, and we're looking forward to releasing this one. And I guess got a lot more coming up. Again, as we wrap this up, if you have any ideas for us to talk about in the podcast, send us an email at avidoutdoors@gmail.com.
Avid Outdoors
avidoutdoorspodcast@gmail.com.
Send us a message on Facebook, Instagram. I don't know if SoundCloud does comments. Maybe they
Not
do.
sure.
But probably the best way would be in an email, Facebook, or Instagram.
Absolutely.
Right.
So everybody else, have a great evening, day, whatever you
Yeah.
might be listening to this in the
Whatever
morning.
it is.
Who knows? Go fishing.
This is Avid Outdoors.